Commander Tom Baker stood at the main viewport of Lunar Station Alpha, his eyes fixed on the beautiful blue marble of Earth hanging in the darkness of space. His 20 years of military service hadn't prepared him for what he was about to witness. The radar screen behind him beeped steadily, monitoring the deep space sector as it had done for the past decade. The first sign of trouble came at 300 Earth Standard Time. The radar's steady beep turned into a shrill alarm that echoed through the station's metal corridors. Baker rushed to the control panel, his heart pounding in his chest. The screen showed hundreds, no, thousands, of objects entering the solar system. "This can't be right," he muttered, running diagnostics on the system. But the readings were clear. Something was coming, and it was coming fast. Baker hit the emergency communication button. "Earth Command, this is Lunar Station Alpha. We have multiple unknown objects approaching from deep space. Numbers are massive. Request immediate verification and response." The reply came quickly, but not from Earth Command. Instead, his old friend Captain Robert Miller's voice crackled through the speaker. "Tom, we're seeing them too. Pacific Orbital is tracking the same signatures. These things are moving at speeds we've never recorded before." Baker watched as the objects crossed the distance from Jupiter to Mars in minutes. Their trajectory was clear. They were heading straight for Earth. His hands moved quickly across the control panel, activating the station's high-powered telescopes. The images that appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. The objects were ships, unlike anything humans had ever built. They were dark, almost invisible against the blackness of space, their surfaces seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with impossible grace, their formations perfect and unchanging. "All stations, all military commands, this is a Class 1 alert," Baker announced, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "We have confirmed first contact scenario. I repeat, first contact scenario. These are not natural objects. These are ships." The next few minutes were chaos. Earth's military forces scrambled to respond, but they were too slow, too disorganized. The alien ships, the Shroud, as they would later be called, didn't attempt communication. They didn't make demands. They simply attacked. From his position on the moon, Baker had a front-row seat to humanity's darkest hour. The Shroud ships released what looked like waves of darkness that rolled across Earth's surface. Wherever these waves touched, everything electronic simply stopped working. Cities went dark. Aircraft fell from the sky. Military defenses fell silent. "My God," Baker whispered, watching as New York's lights winked out, followed by London, then Paris, then Beijing. It was like watching Earth's civilization being erased, one city at a time. The lunar station's communication system crackled with desperate messages. "This is Tokyo Command. We've lost all power. Nothing's responding. Paris is dark. I repeat, Paris is completely dark. Anyone receiving this? Our weapons are dead. Everything's dead." Baker felt helpless as he watched the systematic shutdown of Earth's defenses. The few missiles that were launched were swatted away by the Shroud ships as if they were nothing more than annoying insects. Earth's most advanced fighter jets might as well have been paper airplanes for all the damage they did. Within 48 hours, 40% of Earth's major cities had fallen silent. The remaining cities were in chaos, trying to cope with the sudden loss of all modern technology. The few communications that still reached the lunar station told a story of panic and confusion. But even in those dark moments, Baker saw something that gave him hope. In cities across the globe, people were adapting. When electronic communications failed, they used older methods: radio, Morse code, even signal fires. When modern weapons failed, they found other ways to fight back. Humanity refused to go quietly into the night. Baker made a decision. The lunar station, somehow still functioning, would become a beacon of resistance. He gathered his crew of 20 men and women, looking at each of their determined faces. "I won't lie to you," he said, his voice firm. "Earth has taken a massive hit. But we're still here. As long as we're here, as long as we can think and fight and plan, humanity has a chance. This isn't over. This is just the beginning. As if in response to his words, the station's lights flickered but held steady. Outside, Earth continued to spin, parts of it now dark, but not defeated. Not yet. The real fight was just beginning. 6 months after the Shroud invasion, the old military bunker known as Thunder Mountain had become humanity's largest underground sanctuary. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, its thick walls protected over 5,000 survivors. The bunker's old Cold War-era equipment, too simple to be affected by the Shroud's technology, kept the lights on and the air flowing. Director Mary Wilson walked through the crowded main corridor, nodding to people as she passed. The smell of recycled air and too many humans living in close quarters filled her nose. But she didn't complain. They were alive, and that was what mattered. She reached the command center, where the morning report waited. "What's the status?" she asked her second-in-command, James Cooper. "3 more groups found us last night," Cooper said, pointing to a map on the wall marked with pins showing survivor locations. 1 from Denver, 2 from smaller towns. About 40 people total. The good news is, one of them is a doctor. Wilson nodded. Every survivor with useful skills was precious now. And the bad news? Food supplies are getting lower. We're at about 8 weeks of full rations left. After that, we'll have to cut portions again. Cooper's face was grim. They'd already cut rations twice. Before Wilson could respond, the door burst open. Dr. Alice Reed, their lead scientist, rushed in. Her gray hair was messy, and her eyes were bright with excitement. "Director, you need to see this immediately." Wilson followed Dr. Reed to the science lab, where several other scientists gathered around a sealed glass container. Inside, what looked like black smoke, a piece of Shroud technology they'd managed to capture, was behaving strangely. "Watch this," Dr. Reed said. She turned a valve, increasing the oxygen level in the container. The black smoke began to move erratically, then started to break apart. "What are we looking at?" Wilson asked, leaning closer to the glass. "Their weakness," Dr. Reed replied, her voice filled with hope. "The Shroud can't handle high oxygen levels. Their technology, their weapons, maybe even their bodies, they're all designed for environments with less oxygen than Earth has. We've been running tests for weeks, and the results are clear. The more oxygen we pump in, the weaker their technology becomes." Wilson's mind raced with possibilities. "Can we use this?" "Maybe," Dr. Reed said, "but we need more data. We need to test this on a larger scale. And," she hesitated, "we need to know if it affects their ships the same way it affects their ground technology." Just then, the bunker's radio crackled to life. It was one of their few working communication devices, using old, simple technology. "Thunder Mountain, this is Lookout Post 3. We've got movement up here. A lot of movement." Wilson grabbed the radio. "What kind of movement?" "Shroud ground forces. At least 30 units. They're searching the mountain. They're getting closer to the hidden entrance." The command center erupted into activity. They had defense plans for this situation, but they'd hoped they'd never need them. Wilson turned to Cooper. "Start evacuation plan B. Get all non-essential personnel to the lower levels." She looked at Dr. Reed. "How quickly can you set up an oxygen test?" "A big one. Give me an hour and some help. We got oxygen tanks in medical storage. If we release enough of it near their forces." "Do it," Wilson ordered. "Cooper, get her whatever she needs." The next hour was a blur of activity. While some people moved deeper into the bunker, others helped Dr. Reed set up oxygen tanks near the hidden entrance. They rigged them to release their contents all at once, flooding the area with pure oxygen. Wilson watched on the security cameras as the Shroud forces approached. Their dark, shifting forms moved between the trees, searching methodically. They were getting closer. Too close. "Now," Wilson commanded. Dr. Reed hit the release switch. On the cameras, they watched as clouds of pure oxygen burst from multiple points around the entrance. At first, nothing happened. Then, the shroud forces began to move erratically. Their dark forms wavered, like smoke in a strong wind. Several of them simply dissolved into nothing. The remaining forces retreated quickly, leaving behind strange black residue that soon evaporated. In the command center, there was silence for a long moment. Then Dr. Reed spoke softly. It worked. It really worked. Wilson looked at the faces around her. For the first time in months, she saw real hope in their eyes. "This isn't just a defense," she said. "This is the beginning of our fight back. Get me all our other bunker locations on the radio. We've got work to do." Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains. But inside Thunder Mountain, a new dawn was beginning. Humanity had found its first real weapon against the shroud, and they weren't going to waste it. Dr. Peter White hadn't slept in 36 hours. He sat in his underground lab at Thunder Mountain, staring at brain scan readings on an old computer screen. Cups of cold coffee littered his desk. Something about these readings bothered him, but his tired mind couldn't quite grasp what it was. The door opened, and Director Wilson walked in with Dr. Reed. They had been testing the oxygen weapon on more shroud units with growing success. "Any progress?" Wilson asked, looking at the messy lab with concern. "Something's here," White mumbled, pointing at the screen. "Look at these patterns. Every time we capture shroud technology, it gives off these strange signals. They're like brain waves, but different. Too ordered, too perfect." Dr. Reed leaned closer to the screen. "And these other patterns? Human brain waves. From our volunteers. See how chaotic they are compared to the shrouds." White pulled up two images side by side. "The shroud's patterns are like a perfect symphony. Ours are like jazz. Unpredictable, creative, wild." Suddenly, White sat up straight, his exhaustion forgotten. "Wait. That's it." His fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up more readings. "Every time our test subjects were near shroud technology, while we were scanning them, the shroud signals became distorted. Our messy brain patterns were disrupting their perfect ones." Wilson stepped forward. "Are you saying human thoughts interfere with their technology?" "Not just interfere," White said, excitement making his voice shake. "Look at this." He played a recording from their last oxygen weapon test. "When we released the oxygen, their units fell apart. But look at the readings from the ones closest to our hidden bunker, where there were hundreds of people thinking, feeling, living. Those units broke down faster." Dr. Reed's eyes widened. "Their whole civilization must be based on perfect order, perfect patterns, and human consciousness is chaos," White finished. "Beautiful, unpredictable chaos. Everything they're not." Wilson was already reaching for her radio. "Get me the engineering team. Now." Within hours, Thunder Mountain was buzzing with activity. Engineers pulled out old EEG machines from the medical bay. Computer specialists worked to amplify and broadcast human brain patterns. White supervised it all, running on nothing but coffee and excitement. They built their first test device using parts from old radios and medical equipment. It was ugly, but it worked. They called it the Mind Mirror. "Ready for the test?" White asked, looking at the volunteer sitting in a chair with EEG sensors attached to his head. The volunteer, a young soldier named Mike, nodded. "Ready, Doc." They had captured a piece of shroud technology, a small black sphere that constantly emitted their perfect pattern signals. White placed it in a sealed container and activated the Mind Mirror. The effect was immediate. The sphere's smooth surface began to ripple. Its signals became erratic. After 5 minutes, it started to break apart. "It's not just the oxygen," White explained to Wilson and Reed as they watched. "The oxygen weakens their technology, yes. But this disrupts the very way they think, the way their technology works. They can't handle the randomness of human consciousness." "Can we use this?" Wilson asked. "Build it bigger." White nodded. "If we can amplify human brain patterns and broadcast them, we could disrupt their communications, maybe even their ships." "Do it," Wilson ordered. "But we need to test it more. Make sure it's safe for the volunteers." Over the next week, they ran test after test. They discovered that different types of human brain activity had different effects. Strong emotions, fear, joy, love, created the most disruption. But it was the brain patterns of people dreaming that proved most effective of all. "It makes sense," White explained during one test. "Dreams are when our minds are at their most chaotic, most creative. Everything the shroud isn't." They also found something unexpected. When they tested children's brain patterns, the effect was even stronger. Their young minds, full of imagination and possibility, created chaos in shroud technology like nothing else. Wilson called a meeting of all Thunder Mountain's leaders. In the crowded command center, she laid out their findings. "We found 2 weapons," she said, "the oxygen that weakens them, and now this, the power of human consciousness itself. For the first time, we have real hope of fighting back." She looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. "But we need to be careful, safe, smart. We'll test everything thoroughly before we use it. We won't risk anyone, especially not our children, until we're absolutely sure." As the meeting ended, White returned to his lab. On his screen, human brain waves danced like wild music next to the shroud's rigid patterns. He smiled, thinking how humanity's greatest weakness, our chaos, our unpredictability, had turned out to be our greatest strength. Outside his lab, Thunder Mountain hummed with new energy. They had found their weapon, not in advanced technology or powerful bombs, but in the very thing that made them human, their minds. The old military truck bounced along the dark mountain road. Inside, Commander Tom Baker, who had finally made it back to Earth from the lunar station, checked his equipment one last time. Next to him sat Dr. White with the latest version of the mind mirror device, now called the Lighthouse Beacon. 3 minutes to the broadcast point, the driver called out. Baker looked at his team of 6 people. They were one of 20 teams across the world, all moving into position on this moonless night. Operation Lighthouse was humanity's first coordinated attack against the shroud. "Remember," Baker said, "we set up fast and quiet. The oxygen perimeter goes first, then the broadcast equipment. We have maybe 10 minutes before they detect us." The truck stopped at an old radio tower on the mountaintop. Everyone moved quickly, wearing old-style gas masks that would protect them when they released the oxygen. 2 soldiers set up oxygen tanks in a circle around the tower, while others unloaded the lighthouse beacon. Dr. White worked quickly to connect the device to the tower's old antenna. They had chosen these locations carefully, old broadcast points that used simple, mechanical equipment the shroud couldn't disable. 5 minutes, White called out, attaching the last wire. Inside the device, recorded brain patterns from volunteer dreamers waited to be amplified and broadcast. They had found that mixing patterns from multiple dreamers created the strongest disruption. Baker's radio crackled. It was Director Wilson from Thunder Mountain. "All teams report ready. Initiating countdown. Operation Lighthouse begins in 3 minutes." The night was perfectly clear. Baker could see the lights of a shroud ship far in the distance, its dark shape blocking out the stars. They had timed this attack carefully, waiting for the moment when the most shroud ships would be in range. 1 minute, Wilson's voice came through again. Baker looked at his team. They had trained for weeks for this moment. Every person knew exactly what to do if things went wrong. They had backup plans for their backup plans. Operation Lighthouse is go. All teams activate oxygen perimeter. The tanks released their contents into the night air. Through their gas masks, they watched as the oxygen spread out, creating an invisible barrier against shroud forces. Activate lighthouse beacons. Now. Dr. White flipped the switch. The device hummed to life. On his portable screen, he could see the broadcast waves spreading out in all directions. Human dream patterns, chaotic and beautiful, flew into the night sky. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in the distance, the shroud ship's movements became erratic. Its smooth flight pattern turned jerky, like a bird caught in a storm. "Thunder Mountain, this is Team 7, another radio voice called. "We have visual confirmation. Shroud ship is losing altitude over the Pacific." More reports started coming in from teams around the world. 2 ships down in Europe. They're retreating from Asian airspace. African sector reporting successful disruption. The shroud ship Baker was watching suddenly lit up with strange energy. It spun once, twice, then plummeted toward the ground. The crash lit up the horizon like a new sun. "Keep broadcasting," Baker ordered, even as his heart raced with excitement. This was working. It was actually working. But the shroud weren't defeated yet. In the distance, new ships appeared. These moved differently, more protected somehow. "They're adapting," White said, watching his readings. "The disruption isn't as strong against these new ones." Baker grabbed his radio. "Thunder Mountain, they're bringing in reinforcements. These ones seem partially shielded against the broadcast." Wilson's voice came back calm and clear. "Keep broadcasting. Every second we disrupt them is a second we use to learn more. All teams switch to backup power. We hold our positions as long as we can." The new shroud ships moved closer, but slower than before. They were still affected by the broadcasts, just not as much. On White's screen, the dream patterns continued to pulse outward, humanity's chaotic minds reaching into the sky. Through his gas mask, Baker smiled. Yes, the shroud were adapting. But so were humans. Every ship they brought down taught them more. Every battle made them stronger. "Look there," White pointed to his screen. "The patterns. When they hit the shielded ships, they're creating new disruptions we haven't seen before. We're learning too." The night continued, filled with reports of victories and losses. Some broadcast stations fell, but others held. Humanity had struck its first real blow against the invaders, proving they weren't invincible. Operation Lighthouse marked the turning point in the war. The night humanity's dreams became weapons, and hope became more than just a word. The real fight was just beginning, but for the first time, it felt like a fight they could win. 3 days after Operation Lighthouse, Thunder Mountain shook with explosions. The shroud had found them, and they were angry. Director Wilson stood in the command center, watching multiple screens showing shroud forces approaching from all directions. They moved differently now, their dark forms surrounded by strange shields that glowed faintly purple. "They're targeting all known broadcast stations," Cooper reported, marking red X on the map. "We've lost contact with 12 teams in the last hour." Dr. Reed rushed in, holding new sensor readings. "The shroud have modified their technology. They're using some kind of energy field that dampens our brainwave broadcasts." Wilson nodded grimly. She had expected this. The shroud weren't stupid. Of course they would adapt. But so would humanity. "Get me Dr. White," she ordered. When he arrived, looking tired but determined, she pointed to the map. "We need new broadcast patterns. They've learned to block the dream signals." White rubbed his eyes. "I've been studying the readings. There might be another way." He pulled out a tablet showing brainwave patterns. "We've been using recorded patterns, but what if we used live ones? Direct broadcasts from human minds." "Is that safe?" Wilson asked. "With the right protection, yes. And it would be much harder for them to block, because every human mind is different. The patterns would constantly change." Another explosion rocked the bunker. Dust fell from the ceiling. "Do it," Wilson ordered. "But we need a distraction. Cooper, implement Plan Ghost." Plan Ghost was dangerous but simple. They would make the shroud think Thunder Mountain was being evacuated. While the aliens focused on chasing fake human signals, the real work could continue. Teams of volunteers began driving vehicles away from the mountain, each carrying powerful recordings of human brain patterns. The shroud took the bait, splitting their forces to chase these decoys. Meanwhile, Deep in the bunker, White and his team set up the new broadcast system. They had found their strongest broadcasters, people whose brain patterns created the most disruption in shroud technology. Among them was a 12-year-old girl named Kate. "Are you sure about this?" Wilson asked Kate's parents. Her father, a former teacher, nodded. "She wants to help. And you said it's safe." Kate sat in the modified broadcast chair, small sensors attached to her head. "I'm not scared," she said, though her hands gripped the armrests tightly. "Just think happy thoughts, right?" "That's right," White said kindly. "Just be yourself. Your natural thoughts are perfect." They activated the system. Kate's brain patterns, amplified and broadcast through their remaining network, shot out into the world. On the monitors, they watched as her chaotic, creative, child's mind crashed into the shroud's ordered patterns. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The shroud's new shields flickered and failed. Their coordinated movements became confused. Several of their smaller ships spun out of control. "It's working," White exclaimed. "Their shields can't adapt because her patterns keep changing naturally." Wilson grabbed her radio. All stations switched to live broadcasts. Priority to younger volunteers with parental approval. Coordinate your broadcasts in waves. They can't block what they can't predict. Across the remaining network, more people connected to broadcast chairs. Each human mind added its unique pattern to the chaos being thrown at the shroud. Children's imaginative minds proved especially effective, their thoughts too random and creative for the aliens to counter. The shroud forces around Thunder Mountain began to retreat. Similar reports came in from other locations, but victory had come with a cost. Many broadcast stations had been destroyed, and their network was badly damaged. In the command center, Wilson studied the new situation map. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The shroud would adapt again. They always did. "Director," Cooper called out. "New message from the Pacific bunker. They're seeing something strange in the ocean. The shroud ships are gathering there, dozens of them." Wilson looked at the satellite image. The shroud were indeed gathering, their ships forming a massive circle over the Pacific Ocean. But why? "They're planning something big," she said. "Get me all remaining bunker leaders on the line. We need to prepare." In the broadcast room, Kate remained in her chair, her young mind still broadcasting chaos into the battle space. On the monitors, her brain patterns danced like fireworks, proof that humanity's greatest weapon was its own beautiful, unpredictable nature. The shroud had learned to fear human minds, but something told Wilson that the real test was still to come. The aliens weren't retreating. They were regrouping. And whatever they were planning, it would take everything humanity had to face it. The Pacific Ocean boiled. Hundreds of shroud ships hung in the sky above it, their dark forms creating an artificial night over the water. In Thunder Mountain's command center, Dr. Reed stared at her readings in horror. "They're changing our atmosphere," she announced to the gathered leaders. "The shroud are releasing something into the ocean that's decreasing Earth's oxygen levels. They're terraforming our planet to match their needs." Commander Baker slammed his fist on the table. "How long?" "At this rate." Reed checked her calculations again. 2 weeks before oxygen levels drop too low for humans to survive without special equipment. 1 month before Earth becomes like their home world. Director Wilson looked around the room. Every face showed the same grim understanding. They were running out of time. Dr. White stepped forward, holding a thick folder. "We may have a solution, but..." He hesitated. "You're not going to like it." He spread his papers on the table. They showed complex chemical formulas and atmospheric charts. "We've been studying the oxygen weapon. We think we can modify it, make it bigger. Much bigger." "How much bigger?" Wilson asked. "Global scale. We can release a modified oxygen compound into the atmosphere. It would spread worldwide within days. The concentration would be lethal to the shroud and their technology." The room fell silent. Baker was the first to speak. "What's the catch?" White looked down at his papers. The compound would change Earth's atmosphere forever. Many plants and animals might not survive. The ecosystem would be permanently altered. We'd be trading one terraforming for another. Wilson walked to the window, watching distant shroud ships through the reinforced glass. And if we do nothing, then the shroud win, Reed said simply. Earth becomes their world, and humanity either dies or lives in sealed bunkers forever. The debate raged for hours. Some argued they couldn't destroy their own planet to save it. Others said they had no choice. The shroud had forced their hand. In the end, Wilson made the decision. If we do nothing, Earth dies anyway. At least this way, it remains our Earth, changed but still ours. Begin preparations. The plan was massive in scale. They would need to release the compound from multiple points around the globe, all at once. It would require every surviving bunker, every resistance cell, working in perfect coordination. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Scientists worked around the clock, producing the compound. Engineers modified aircraft to carry it. Everyone knew they had only one chance to get this right. On the morning of the operation, Wilson addressed all the bunkers via radio. Today we take back our world. The cost is high, but the cost of failure is higher. Every human on Earth is counting on us, whether they know it or not. The attack began at dawn. Modified planes, protected by bands of child broadcasters disrupting shroud defenses, took off from hidden runways around the world. Each carried tanks of the oxygen compound. The shroud realized the threat too late. Their ships tried to intercept the planes, but the combined power of human broadcasts, especially from the children, kept them confused and disorganized. High above the Earth, the planes released their cargo. The compound, specially designed to spread quickly through the atmosphere, began to work immediately. Clouds of it spread across the sky, turning slightly blue where it concentrated. The effect on the shroud was devastating. Their ships began falling from the sky as the compound ate through their technology. Their ground forces dissolved into nothing. Their massive terraforming operation over the Pacific sputtered and died. In Thunder Mountain, Wilson watched the satellite feeds. Across the globe, shroud ships were either falling or fleeing into space. They had won, but at what cost? Dr. Reed approached with the first atmospheric readings. The compound is spreading as predicted. Oxygen levels are stabilizing. But, she paused, the air will never be quite the same. We'll adapt, but our world has changed. Wilson nodded. She could already see the sky taking on a slightly different color through the bunker's windows. Earth would survive. Humanity would survive. But both would be forever marked by the choices made this day. Send word to all bunkers, she ordered. Operation successful. Begin environmental monitoring. We need to understand our new world. As the sun set on this historic day, the sky glowed with colors humanity had never seen before. It was beautiful in its own way, a testament to how far they had gone to survive, and a reminder of the price of victory. The Shroud were defeated, but humanity's greatest challenge was just beginning, learning to live in the world they had been forced to create. 1 month after the defeat of the Shroud, Commander Baker stood on top of Thunder Mountain, breathing the new air of Earth. The sky above him had a permanent bluish-purple tint now, a reminder of what humanity had done to survive. Scientists called it the New Dawn. Behind him, the bunker entrance opened. Director Wilson walked out, carrying 2 old coffee cups. She handed one to Baker. The last report just came in, she said. The Shroud ships have moved beyond Pluto's orbit. Long-range scans show them heading to a different star system. Baker took a sip of coffee. They won't be back. No, Wilson agreed. We're too dangerous for them now. Unpredictable minds and poisonous air. Earth must seem like hell to them. Below the mountain, work teams moved through the valley. They were studying the changed plant life. Most plants had survived the atmospheric change, but they were different now. Leaves had taken on purple edges, and some trees had grown twice as fast in the new air. Dr. Reed appeared from the research station they'd built outside the bunker. Her face was excited. "You need to see this," she said, leading them to her laboratory. Inside, laid out on tables, were pieces of shroud technology that hadn't disintegrated. In the new atmosphere, they were inert, dead metal that could be studied safely. "We're beginning to understand how they work," Reed explained. "Their ships, their weapons, they're amazing. And now they're ours to learn from." White joined them, carrying a modified version of the mind mirror. "Look at this," he said, activating the device. The shroud metal responded to the human brainwave patterns, but instead of breaking down, it glowed softly. "We can control it," White said proudly. "Their technology responds to organized thought. They used perfect patterns, but we found that human brain patterns work too, just differently. We're teaching their machines to understand chaos." Wilson picked up a small piece of the alien metal. "How long until we can build our own ships?" "A year, maybe 2, Reed answered. "We're already working on prototypes. Combining their technology with ours, powered by human thought patterns, they'll be unlike anything Earth has ever seen." Through the laboratory window, they could see the new settlement growing around Thunder Mountain. People were emerging from bunkers worldwide, learning to live under the changed sky. The first crops planted in the new soil were growing well, adapted to the altered atmosphere. Kate, the young broadcaster who had helped save humanity, ran past the window with other children. They wore simple breathing masks, a precaution while their bodies adapted to the new air. But they were laughing, playing, living. Their minds, so chaotic and creative, had proved to be humanity's greatest weapon. Now those same minds would help build humanity's future. "The UN is reforming," Wilson said, reading from a report on her tablet. "The old nations are coming together under a new banner. They're calling it the Earth Unity Council." "Unity," Baker smiled. "Nothing like an alien invasion to bring people together." A loud hum filled the air. Above the mountain, a test vehicle rose into the sky. Humanity's first attempt at building a ship using modified shroud technology. It was smaller than their original ships and looked almost organic, its surface rippling with patterns that matched the pilot's thoughts. "That's the future up there," White said, watching the ship climb higher. "We're not just surviving anymore. We're growing, learning, becoming something new." Wilson looked at the changed world around them. The purple-tinted sky, the adapted plants, the new technology they were building. All of it marked by humanity's desperate fight for survival. But also by their courage, their creativity, their unwillingness to surrender. "Send a message to all settlements," she said. Tell them dawn has come. We're not hiding anymore. Earth is ours again." As the sun set on this new world, its light passing through the altered atmosphere created colors no human had seen before the war. But they were Earth's colors now, beautiful in their own way. They were the colors of survival, of victory, of hope. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged changed but unbroken. In their darkest moment, their resolve had indeed burned brighter than ever before. Now they looked to the stars not with fear, but with determination and curiosity. The war was over. The dawn of a new age had begun. And this time, humanity would be ready for whatever the universe had in store for them.